So, have you ever thought about how you securely connect your on-premise world to the cloud? Well, today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to build that bridge, not with steel and concrete, of course, but with data and credentials. We're going to demystify hybrid identity in Microsoft Entra. Let's get right into it.
Okay, picture this. You've got an employee, right? And they need to access a local server on-prem, but they also need to get into something like Microsoft 365 in the cloud. That's one person, one single identity, but they're operating in two completely different worlds. So the big question is, how do you secure that identity so it's consistent and safe everywhere? That's the challenge that pretty much every modern business is facing right now. And this is exactly where hybrid identity comes into play. It's this idea of having a single, unified identity for every user that gives them seamless access to everything, whether it's local files or cloud apps. Just think of it like having one single key for your entire digital world.
So, how do we actually build this identity bridge we're talking about? Well, the tool for the job is Microsoft Entra Connect. This thing is really the engine that makes all of hybrid identity possible. Its main job is actually pretty straightforward. It synchronizes user identities from your on-premise Active Directory up to the cloud-based Microsoft Entra ID. And by doing that, it creates one consistent identity across both platforms, which is absolutely crucial for everything we're about to talk about.
All right, so once you've built that bridge, you've got a really important decision to make. How are your users actually going to authenticate? How are they going to prove who they are? The method you pick here has a huge impact on security, the user experience, and, how resilient your whole system is.
You basically have three main paths you can go down. First is password hash synchronization, which we'll call PHS. Second is pass-through authentication, or PTA. And the third is federated authentication, which is often handled by something called ADFS. So let's break down what each of these really means.
First up, we've got password hash sync, or PHS. With this one, when a user tries to log in, Microsoft Entra ID can check their credentials right there in the cloud. And I want to be super clear about this. It is not the actual password that's stored in the cloud. It's a secure, one-way hash of the password. And this sync happens about every 2 minutes, so everything stays fresh and up to date.
Next, we've got pass-through authentication. Now with PTA, the password literally never touches the cloud, not even as a hash for authentication. Instead, there's a lightweight little agent on-prem that takes the sign-in request and passes it back to your local Active Directory to validate it in real time. And finally, there's federation. This is by far the most complex option. Here, the sign-in request gets completely redirected to on-premise servers, like an ADFS farm, and that infrastructure handles the authentication and then sends a security token back up to the cloud.
So, how in the world do you choose? Well, let's look at the trade-offs. PHS is the simplest and most resilient, hands down. It has zero infrastructure footprint on-prem. PTA needs those lightweight agents on-prem, but it lets you enforce local policies in real time, which can be a big deal. And then federation, it's complex, requires a lot of on-prem gear, and is really best if you already have a big investment in that kind of infrastructure. Business continuity is just so critical, and this quote here, it really drives the point home. This comes from real-world ransomware attacks. The companies that had PHS turned on, they were back online in just a matter of hours. The ones that didn't, it took them weeks to recover. Weeks.
So if there's one crucial takeaway from all this, it's this. Always, and I mean always, enable password hash sync, even if it's just as a backup. Think of it as your identity safety net. It keeps your business running in the cloud even if your entire on-premise world goes down.
But of course, even with the best plans, things can hit a snag. So let's shift gears and talk about troubleshooting some of the most common synchronization errors you might run into. So here's a classic problem. Let's say on-premise, in your Active Directory, you have two different people, Joe Johnson and Joe Jackson. But when they get synced to the cloud, somehow they both end up with the same user principal name. Well, the system sees that conflict, flags it, and quarantines one of the accounts, which stops any future syncs for that object.
This kind of problem is called a duplicate attribute error, and honestly, it's the root cause of most sync headaches. Microsoft Entra ID just has to have unique attributes, like the user principal name. As soon as it finds a duplicate, the sync for that object fails.
The good news, though, is that the fix is pretty straightforward. First, you identify the conflict, which value is duplicated and on which objects. Second, you figure out which user should actually have that value. And third, you just remove it from the incorrect object. But, and this is key, you have to do it in your on-premise Active Directory. The change has to be made at the source, and then Entra Connect will sync that correction right up.
Okay, so fixing errors is good, but you know what's even better?
preventing them in the first place. And that's exactly where Microsoft Entra Connect Health comes in. You can think of Connect Health as your main dashboard for your entire hybrid identity setup. It keeps an eye on your sync servers and on-prem agents, gives you all sorts of performance data, and maybe most importantly, it sends you alerts for critical issues like sync failures. So in short, Connect Health is what makes sure that identity bridge you built is strong, stable, and secure. It really helps you get ahead of problems so you can be proactive instead of just reactive.
We've covered a ton of ground today, from choosing an authentication method to troubleshooting errors. But when you boil it all down, it comes to this. Your identity system is the digital front door to your entire organization. So, the real question you have to ask yourself is, how strong is your lock?